Welcome back, and thanks again for joining me on Sweat Success Podcast. You know, if you're one of those fitness individuals or coaches that really wants to stay at the forefront, wants to level up your game, and you also are kind of the type of person to be at the forefront of technology, you're probably going to want to listen into the show today, because the guy that I've got on the show is not only breaking boundaries, but he's really kind of crossing the chasm in technology. And I remember a few years ago, I bought a Steph Curry masterclass for my son. So that way he could do the drills, the Steph Curry drills, and go through everything. And he would do this all on his phone. I remember him going out in our backyard on the basketball court, and he'd sit there and go through the drills, and he'd be finished up, and it was a great workout for him. But imagine if my son had the ability to go through those drills with headphones in his ear, with Steph Curry giving him guidance on coaching, or sensors on his clothing that was maybe giving him cues to go ahead and maybe move a specific direction or not move a specific direction because that didn't align with the exact shot or the exact movement that Steph Curry has. Now imagine you yourself can do the same thing, and you can pick Michael Jordan, or you can pick LeBron James, or you can pick Babe Ruth. You can pick anyone that you want. If you want to have Tiger Woods' swing, you can do that. And he's the one talking in your ear, helping coach you through that process. Well, the guy I've got on the show, Steven Webster, is the same guy who's created Asensei, and that is the product that is really starting to change the game when it comes to technology. And his product, his technology, is being used in a lot of the same brands that you have at home that you buy today, and it's being used in their apparel, in their fitness tech, and in their gear. And you're going to hear directly from him. So without further ado, Steven Webster. All right, so we're jumping right back in here, and I've got Steven Webster on the show from Asensei, and very unique and interesting background. Steven is a karate pro, and beyond being a karate, are you a karate master?
I'll stick with black belt and instructor. I'll probably even cross out pro, but yeah.
But he has, worked in the technology field for many years out in California, and worked with Microsoft and some of the big names that you all know, and created a product, Asensei, and he has been driving the forefront of the future for really how you image capture your movement, and how you can take that movement and utilize it to improve the way that you move, to enhance your abilities. And he's going to give us a little bit of a master class, because the last time we were talking about master class, Steven. And
that's right. That's we are.
Yeah. And, he, I guess I had pulled up a pitch deck of his own, that he had been using, and it was very similar, because I had this crazy idea that I thought would be great. And guess what? The guy's way ahead of me, obviously. So
it was just a good idea. Idea.
So, Steven, I want, you to just, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of give a quick background on, where you came from and how this evolved into Asensei.
No, I'd love to. And first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conversation. So, as you can tell by my accent, I didn't start in California. I grew up in Scotland. And, it's kind of funny when I tell my story, it's just this constant interweave of sport and technology. I was that kid. My dad was an electrical engineer. I was probably the first kid in my town to have a computer at home, and always surrounded by technology, and always fascinated by technology. And I just played a ton of sport, like a lot of us as kids. Jack of all trades, not quite master of any, I guess. But I played a lot of soccer, a lot of water sports like swimming and windsurfing. But my passion was always martial arts. I started a judo class when I was like 7. That became jiu-jitsu, which was like my main core. And I was just, I can't put it any easier way than I was obsessed by martial arts. I woke up and it was all I thought about. It was all I wanted to do. I imagined owning a dojo one day when I was older, and, that would be my job. I would be a professional instructor. Um, and then, fast forward a little, when I went to university, I studied at University of Edinburgh, and I didn't want to be all about the academics. I was studying electronics and computer science, but I wanted to play sport and I wanted to compete in sport. And the jiu-jitsu I practiced was Japanese jiu-jitsu, not Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So there was no competition. And I wanted to compete. I wanted to see if I could, medal as a university athlete. So I joined the karate program at the university. So I competed, captained, I assistant coached, and then ultimately ended up taking over the full-time coaching of that club, and took that club to 10 consecutive national championships before I moved to California. So I've just always really enjoyed kind of practicing and coaching. And maybe we get into this a bit more, so I'll just kind of summarize. But one of the privileges of teaching an institution like Edinburgh University is you can call any instructor in the world and say, if I was to fly you to Scotland, pay for your flights, put up your accommodation, there may be some whiskey involved, and you get to coach for a couple of days at the weekend, will you come? And the answer was always yes. So I had the privilege of flying some of the best instructors in the world to my club, training with them, but then not seeing them for another 6 months. So that kind of created this agita, if you like, of how do you practice when the coach isn't there? How do you practice solo? How do you practice remotely? And then in parallel to all of this, the way I paid for being a karate coach was I had a real job as first an electrical engineer and then a software engineer, and sold my first company to Adobe. That's what moved me to California. Adobe to Microsoft. And all the time I was with these companies, I mean, we've all seen the journey, right, of Fitbits and quantified self and smart sensors and Microsoft Connect cameras tracking our movement. And I just increasingly realized this idea that a machine could facilitate, or a computer could facilitate, coaching absent the coach on the coach's behalf is becoming more and more possible. And so I had that "do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life" moment at Microsoft. I was like, I've got to do this. I've got to start this company. I think we can make human movement something a machine can understand. And I think if we do that, the digitization of sport and fitness and healthcare, both brick and mortar and at home, like any other industry, we'll see that digital transformation happen. And I want to be one of the core technologies. So here we are. At the beginning of an exciting period in the industry, I think.
Well, I think obviously, because you're in the tech industry and because of where you're positioned in California, you probably see a lot more things than most from what is on the next phase of technology, what is coming out before the masses see it. And we're at a point in time now where the masses are all too familiar now with AI technology. They're all too familiar with the way that they can even potentially utilize that. And you are at this intersection point of taking your product and intertwining it with AI technology. What do you think is going to happen next? I mean, because really what your product does is it's essentially you're selling business to, not business, but you're selling at a enterprise level, and you're providing your product or your SDK, correct, to some of these larger corporations who are saying, okay, how can we utilize this in our clothing or our apparel? How can we utilize this with our own applications that we have that we're using and maximize this so you can have that karate coach, you can have that master, right, that is teaching you exactly what you need to be doing through your movement, maybe giving you a nudge when you take your elbow out a little too far in a position or a stance. So how is it that you see this intersection happening, and what's on the horizon?
Yeah, maybe great question. Before I go there, maybe let's back up for everyone and just give a little bit more of an understanding of, rather than talk about the tech, I'd rather talk about our customers because they're ultimately your touch point with our technology. So, we're an ingredient technology. You probably have a television, or I'm looking at a TV, a Sonos soundbar, and a MetaQuest headset, and probably my iPhone. And the audio in all of those products is Dolby. It's Dolby Atmos. So Dolby is this ingredient technology that none of these companies want to figure out, how do I deliver the best imaginable surround sound audio experience? It's like, I'll go to Dolby for that. So Asensei is similarly that kind of an ingredient brand. But the problem that we solved is, how do we make human movement something a machine can understand, assess, and then on behalf of a coach intervene? Because that's essentially what we do when we're coaching, right? So we do three things. The first is motion capture. So whether it's by putting sensors in clothing, or at the moment it's increasingly just using the camera on a smartphone, or the camera on a TV, or the camera in a mirror. How can we motion capture your skeleton in real time so that we can at least give that perception to a machine that our eyes give us as coaches? I can see what you're doing. Then the next thing is, once I can see what you're doing, do I have some understanding of how it should be done and how well you're doing it? So as a karate coach, if I tell you to get into a left stance and throw a reverse punch with your right hand, I'll immediately start having internal opinions on your stance, on your punch. Should I be fixing your stance before your punch? Is your stance great, but your core? So I'm going through some kind of recognition of what you're doing and some assessment of what you're doing. And then finally, I'm making a decision about my intervention. Now, sometimes the intervention as a coach is no intervention. Maybe I'll tell you later, or maybe next week in a different class, we'll kind of pick this up later. Or maybe it's something I know you should know. I'll be like, hey, Michael, remember when you're in that stance, I want to see your front foot turned a little bit, or I want to see your back leg straight, or I want to see you on the ball of your foot. So I may kind of cue you in real time. So we're thinking about, how do we give that capability and that power to the digital apps or the digital products that accompany us when we're practicing sport or fitness or physical therapy. And sometimes those products might be at home. They're in our garage, or they're in our living room. Or sometimes we might be in a brick and mortar facility. We might be in a studio. We might be in a gym, but we have our devices with us, or we're standing in front of a station or a studio or a piece of fitness equipment that has our technology embedded. I'll give you some examples of customers, and then I think that gives us good context. So if you think of the at-home experience where you're unsupervised, I might think of Alter. Alter are one of our customers who have beautiful mirror that you can hang on your wall or lean against the floor, see yourself practicing, but also see the reflection of a coach and a trainer. It's like that coach is in the room with you because they're appearing in the reflection. And using the camera on that mirror, we're tracking the work that you're doing. How many reps are you doing? Are you doing the reps well? Should we give you some real-time feedback? Is it time to progress you because you're doing that exercise well? And so there's technical challenge. Or should we regress you? As a coach, I might see you trying to do an overhead squat with weight and think, let's just do a squat. Let's not have any load involved there. So that's a good at-home solo practice experience. You might be familiar with Power Block. Power Block, the interchangeable dumbbell that you see in gyms and colleges around the country. Power Block worked with us, so not only could we recognize what exercises you're doing, how well you're doing them, what feedback you should be getting, but we're even detecting what weight you're carrying. We've turned the smartphone into a scale, right? We can tell whether you're holding 10s or 15s or 50s. And so when you start marrying the data or the insight about how well you're moving with the load that you're trying to move, again, that kind of unlocks the kind of capabilities that a customer like Power Block might use. So that's just two examples of a very physical product and a very digital product that can be used at home or in a gym. So, to come back to your question about what does the future look like? I think the future becomes this much more, the immediate future becomes this kind of seamless blend of at home and in studio. The consumer doesn't, listen, as an industry, we love to have the argument. It's Betamax versus VHS. It's Flash versus HTML. It's good versus evil, right? We love to kind of pit two opponents against each other and see who wins. And, in our line of work is like, do consumers want to work out at home like they did in the pandemic, or they're all rushing back to the gym and rushing back to the studio? And the reality is the sort of secular shift that happened during COVID is very similar to ones that we've seen in other industries like retail before. It's very typical of what happens when digital touches your industry. Is the consumer suddenly realizes they don't have to choose between digital and physical. They expect to move seamlessly between the two. So I expect to be able to, purchase a shirt online at Nordstrom, but when it doesn't fit, I want to walk into the store in San Francisco and return it and get a store credit that I might spend online when I get home. I don't expect to have to present the digital version of myself or the in-person version of myself and have a different disconnected experience. And so I think what we'll see a lot of in our part of the industry is that kind of hybridization and that idea that the work that I do at home, because I'm time poor or because I actually enjoy working at home and I enjoy the experience I can now get with my power blocks or that I can get with my connected fitness mirror. But then I walk into a studio with a gym. I would love that trainer in that gym to know me and know that at home yesterday in front of my mirror, we kind of spotted that my hip flexors are tight and I just did, this kind of workout. So today in studio, give the trainer that information to better personalize the experience I'm going to have in the gym. Or maybe the studio has a mirror in it for me to warm up in front of, and that mirror knows what I did yesterday, and that can kind of tailor the warm up I get today. So I can talk for days about these kind of different like hybrid experiences, but I think if you're in the world of brick and mortar, you should no longer assume that the consumer journey begins as you exit the changing room and ends when you go in the shower. The consumer journey begins with what were you doing yesterday at home and ends with what movement prep or cool down or work are you going to do before I see you the next time. And so I'm much less interested in like AI is taking over the world and you should be using it for all your outbound marketing. Like those are like, that's boring stuff. It's like we have a real opportunity to wrap the experience around the consumer and around our members and start thinking about, what are the elevated experiences we can deliver with them, either because we engage them digitally before and after they enter our facility, or we bring some elements of the digital experience into the facility to aid with personalization and to bring them the coaching they need. Does that make sense?
So it does. And there's a few products that you're already partnered with that are using Asensei.
Yeah.
And they are in that virtual realm.
Yep.
Is it okay if we talk about how they're integrated or how they are using that product? Because then I want to jump into Power Block and the gyms, right? Because there are those two pieces. There are those people who have the virtual stuff, they're at home, and then they go to the gym. So I want to tackle that a little bit.
If they're on our website, we can talk about them.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, for the at home, there's lots of different use cases and lots of different consumers. So some of the brands, that we've said we're working with, there's Alter, who I just spoke about, so physical piece of hardware where the content's being delivered through that hardware. And they're not just personalizing the fitness experience with, movement tracking with Asensei. They're doing DNA swabs to understand your proclivity to certain types of exercise. They're using, heart rate straps to decide on where you are in kind of rest and recovery. So they're really thinking about how do I personalize the at-home experience absent a coach paying attention to you. Can't talk about what we're doing or when we're doing, but we announced that we are working with Center, Chris Hemsworth's company. And that's an interesting one. I don't know how much people know about, but Center was a digital property. You can train with Chris Hemsworth's trainers, traditional kind of strength, yoga, Pilates, mindfulness, nutrition. But relatively recently, Center combined with physical equipment manufacturer Inspire Fitness, a company that had come out of a bunch of folks at Precor. And so you can see how Center are really starting to think about how do you blend physical and digital? Like how do you take that performance rack or that kettlebell or that sandbag or that dumbbell, and how do you marry that with digital content? And they're even doing partnerships with, they do a lot right now publicly with High Rocks, where how does my at-home training become, maybe I'll enter a fitness competition and maybe there's community
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're a really interesting study in a company who understands that being pure play digital or pure play physical is not enough, and you can kind of meet your consumer there. I'll go totally different. We have another company in Europe called Fitar, and they're in that kind of world of XR gaming. Okay, so they're bringing the content to the television and really trying to engage that consumer that may feel intimidated by big box physical fitness, but they're still happy to stand in front of their TV and learn to box or learn to do yoga, or maybe even for younger consumers, kind of play physical games that get the heart rate up and get me moving and get me mobile, but maybe look a little, less traditional, I guess. So there's a kind of portfolio of the sort of digital customers. And then for some of our customers that are more physical product, we mentioned Power Block. An example, I think the only public example of a company where we're working with, where the idea is we can look at that physical equipment that you're using. And what I love about this is, they have a footprint of product that's already sold. They don't need to recall it and stick Bluetooth and batteries and sensors on it for it suddenly to become a digital product, right? If that's your interchangeable dumbbell that you've had for the last 20 years, suddenly with a smartphone, you can have an experience the same as a tonal or the same as some other piece of connected hardware, where we can see the dumbbell, we can see that you've picked it up, we know what weight we're using, we know how well you're moving it, we know what you should be doing and what you are doing, and suddenly that untaps like digital experiences. And then kind of running through our customer list in my head here, but the last one that I heard you mention there is Vertimax, another great example of very prevalent piece of fitness equipment. You'll see it in most colleges, in their gym or in their fitness room. Often used for kind of vertical jump, movements. So for jump sports, for basketball, volleyball, explosiveness. That used to be something that would have to be married with fairly expensive equipment to assess your time of flight or assess like how high you've jumped. Now with the Asensei, we're able to do all of that again with a smartphone. No batteries, no Bluetooth, no sensors, no cables. We can just use a smartphone camera to watch, first of all, did you jump? Did you jump correctly? Because it's not just about like, by any means possible, get in the air. Was it a countermeasure jump? Was it a single leg jump? Was it a standing jump? So we can watch you do the jump. We can watch whether you did that jump correctly. And if all of the above is true, we can say, how far did your center mass displace? Or what was your highest point off the ground? Were you trailing your feet or did you tuck your feet? So suddenly all of this data that you would have needed like a LeBron James like lab to be able to get that data, we can give that to the consumer. We can give that to the parent of the high school kid through an app and a smartphone. And that's the kind of technologies that you want to start seeing in your brick and mortar facility, that your Vertimax is a tablet in front of it, that your Power Blocks, you're making your members aware of the fact that either if you're a gym that uses Power Block, maybe your gym app should be integrated with Asensei so that you can unlock the digital capabilities of Power Block, or maybe you're using an app from someone else that works with those Power Blocks. So that's what you're going to see a lot more of, is like the legacy equipment feeling digitized and elevating the experience that you're getting in studio or in gym.
So if I'm understanding this correctly and just kind of repeating it for the audience that's listening, really all you need is a phone or a camera, right? Because your camera, as long as it's web enabled, you can push that information onto a computer somewhere. And you can take that information, whatever that camera is capturing. Is there a specific level of camera that you need? I mean,
if it's a dollar camera, it's good enough. Yeah.
So it's capturing the motion, and then it's spitting out the data on the metrics of movement that you've taken, and then what corrections need to be made. So to your point, this can be done at home and then cross over into the fitness space if you have a trainer at the gym. And your trainer is coaching you once or twice a week at the gym space. Your client can be at home, because we all know this. A lot of times you give them homework to do and they don't do it. Right. So they wonder why they're not seeing the results. And it's because, they are only training twice a week at the gym.
Right.
But now you have a way to capture what they're doing at home when you do give them the homework, or when they are going on vacation and they don't want to fall off the bandwagon a little
Right.
bit. They want to make sure they stay on track. So this is a way to capture really what's going on with their program. It's not just entering the data into a sheet, because that's what happens today, right? You see this a lot with training apps. They just punch in, I did this workout and I lifted this weight, and that all looks good.
Right.
When in all reality, maybe they didn't do any of it, or they,
or
they
miscounted,
did accidentally miscounted, right?
Yeah.
So that being the case, then the question is, you level up a little bit, right? Now you go to the next level of performance. Because years ago, and still today, we have a lot of technology that's measuring athletes, right, on a very high level, Olympic athletes, and we're measuring this data so that way they can get the most out of their bodies, right? They can perform even at a higher level as long as your coach is there analyzing this information. You mentioned this concept of jumping, and the movement with jumping. The biggest question that I have, and I don't know if the listeners have this, but I'm assuming they might, because it's a lot of coaches that are listening to this stuff. Who is telling a sensei the way you're supposed to jump, right? Who is programming that? Because that's the bigger question, because a lot of coaches, everyone listening, if they're a trainer, most of them all think they know better than every other trainer.
Right.
And so when they're working with their clients, they have a specific way that they want to train their client, or the specific way they want them to move their body.
Right.
And that can get lost. So who is training and teaching this computer to have the output the way you want it?
It's the $1 million question. And I'm a coach. I don't want to live in a world where AI replaces coaches, or where we think a machine can figure out something better than someone who for 20 years has coached, a couple hundred athletes a year. And so the way we designed Asensei from the ground up was, we can watch the way a coach watches, we can see what a coach sees, and we can say what the coach says. But the syllabus, if you like, we call it, in our product, we call it the coaching strategy. The coaching strategy is configurable by the coach. Now, we tend to not do that at the individual trainer level, but more at the brand level, right? So, I don't want to make up brands and people. And so just imagine imagine a big box gym, and they say, we want to be able to watch our members at home and let them feel like our trainers from our top gyms are the ones that are in their ear, giving them coaching and correction. Somewhere in that big box gym, there's a director of education, or there's a coaching staff, or there's a point of view on what's the repertoire of exercises we teach, how do we want to teach them, what are the cues that we use. If I see Michael doing a squat and he's exhibiting torso shift and torso rotation and knee valgus, which one am I going to fix first? I'm not going to tell him all three things at once. So all of that knowledge and expertise is encoded as configuration files for any individual deployment of Asensei. So Asensei will teach whichever way the brand or the organization or the governing body or the coach wants to coach. And really all Asensei is doing, but all Asensei is doing is watching to see the athlete do the things the coach wants them to do, recognizing when they're not doing the things they want them to do, or maybe when they are doing things well, and then to basically ask the question, what would the coach do in this moment, given what the coach told me about how to coach, and I'll deliver that coaching. So you might hear the voice of a celebrity, the voice of an athlete, the voice of a coach in your ear, because if they were there and they saw you do this in this moment, that's what they told us they would have said or they would have done, or that's the progression they would have introduced, or they might have a drill, that a whole coaching drill where, again, I might see you doing a movement and I see you making a mistake. It's like, okay, stop. Let's not try and do a TRX squat row. Let's do the squat first. Let's get the mechanics of that right. And then we'll add the row back in again. That decision to decompose the movement and isolate a skill and teach that skill, those are all things that each individual deployment of Asensei the brand or the company or the Power Block or the Vertimax. They have input on that with our team to teach the way they want to teach. But I don't believe in we're going to feed in 1,000 videos of people playing golf and our AI is going to teach golf better than Tiger Woods' swing coach. It's like, no, it's not. That's not the approach we're trying to take. Does that make sense?
It does. So if I were to do this on this level, right? Let's say I was like, hey, Steven, can we run this path? And I want everyone to coach like me. I want everybody to train others just like I train them. How many man hours is it to skew up the program so it goes, okay, so now, Asensei, you are now a replica of Michael Benso. You're now doing this thing.
I mean, it's super fast. I mean, typically we add a new exercise let's say you were to come to me with some movement that I've never seen before and Asensei's never been taught before.
Right.
I mean, good luck with that. I mean, the body only bends so many ways. We lift, we pull, we hinge, we push. But if you were to say, does Asensei know how to do a Turkish get up? And we're like, we don't know that one. It would take us maybe a day to train Asensei to recognize a Turkish get up the way that you want to see it performed. We might spend a few more days going through what are the points of performance you're looking for, what's the order of importance of those points of performance. But the general process of you showing us what you want Asensei to recognize and us training Asensei to recognize it, we tell our customers it's around a day for us to train that. And that's to train the recognition of the movement and what we call the nuances of the movement. A nuance is either a negative nuance. I don't want to see your heel on the ground at the end of a reverse punch, or a positive nuance. Something that I did want to see, that you locked your hips square at the end of the punch and didn't over rotate through the punch. Mm-hmm. So positive and negative nuances. The final part is what's your language? What's the coaching language that you like to use? Whether that's language around a setup position, whether that's language around and now do this and now do this. Whether it's your external cues, whether it's your corrective cues, you give us that language. And we can even have Asensei say it in your voice. I mean, you've seen the voice cloning technologies now. Yeah. So we can have Asensei dynamically use your voice as the fingerprint, if you like, or the voice print for the delivery of that cue. So, I mean, you joked at the top of the show about your awesome idea that you had. I was like, that's in my slide deck. It used to be slide 2 or 3 of my venture deck was, I live in a world where my son is going to learn to play basketball with the voice of Steph Curry in his ear, telling him to bring his elbow in a little bit more. We're in that world now where we can take, the voice. There's a whole bunch of legislation and ethics and things around this, so it's definitely an interesting subject, but technically we can take the voice of any athlete, the voice of any coach, and, obviously with their permission, we can deliver instruction that's dynamic. It's not some pre-canned audio. It's like, Michael, that one was great, but this time I want you to do 3 more with your elbow tucked in a little bit more and release just a little bit higher above your head. And it's like, wow, Steph is like right there in my ear coaching me 3-point shots. So that's where the tech's at.
How long do you think it's going to be before this stuff is mainstream and I can get it on my phone? I can just pick my masterclass on my phone of Steph Curry, and it's not the old school masterclass where you're going through his drills. Yeah. Rather, it's Steph Curry or Michael Jordan, and you can practice their specific movements to a point where you learn them so well that now you have done them, right? Yeah. If somebody wants to dance like Michael Jackson and do the moonwalk, done. You can do it.
Right.
How far away are we from that actually happening? Because that's where you get that movement, right? Of right. This technology being in everybody's hands.
Yeah. So, every technology goes through a very familiar adoption curve. It's something I talk about quite a lot. And there's a moment in that adoption curve we call the chasm. In the technology industry, we call it crossing the chasm. And to the left of the chasm is the pioneers. The pioneers are, everybody thinks they're stupid and crazy and no one's going to want this. And the people that are buying are not your average consumer. It's the people that love to fund Kickstarter campaigns and get things early and have things before everyone else. Like, we're past the pioneer stage of connected fitness. That was Peloton and Tonal and Hydro. The other side of the chasm is the mass market, so nobody's really asking, do I need this? It's like, who do I want it from? So the mass market is the world where the brands that we already know and love are putting these kind of technologies into their products. And the chasm's a really dangerous spot because people fall forwards into the chasm, they run out of venture funding, and they run backwards into the chasm. I mean, BlackBerry, Blockbuster, Nokia, there's lots of companies that are like, I hope the future looks just like the present because we're making hay while the sun shines right now. And they get run over by digital new entrants, right? So to answer your question of where are we, I think we're at the chasm crossing point, and I could unpack this a lot more, but the summary is all evidence shows us that we're at the point where the mass market is starting to adopt, and where companies like Asensei emerge to tell the mass market, you don't need to spend millions of dollars and like 18 months trying to build what Peloton built. You can have this up and running, in the next 4 to 6 weeks, much more cheaply and much better, quite frankly, because we call it the picks and shovels. We've built the picks and the shovels that you need to go and mine for gold. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So to answer your question, when are we going to see this stuff? I mean, we've got, 10 to 15 customers putting products live this year. So you'll see some variation of these, you'll see fitness mirrors, you'll see apps on televisions, you'll see some of the digital apps that you already have on your phone. You'll walk into some gyms and there'll be a warm-up studio where you'll warm up in front of a camera and the trainer will walk over and see a sort of report of your warm-up and give you some recommendations. All of these things are going to be true before Christmas, and you're going to see all of those. When will you see the mass adoption of that? When will you see that in every single gym? When will every TV have Dolby sound on it? That's usually going to be a 2 or 3 year process, right? But I think all evidence is, this is a must-have capability. It's table stakes that we, the products that we own and use at home, we expect them to be able to give us feedback about how well we're using them. And so I think if you look at the at-home products like Peloton Guide or Tempo, and now all the products coming out, the mirrors with form tracking, and like every venture deck has form tracking in it now for any new product. So it's absolutely, another customer we have is Bout, which is a boxing bag with a camera mounted on it, and it's tracking your punches and giving you feedback on what punches you threw and how well you threw them. They're deploying that bag in studios as well as at home. So consumer expectations at home are like, this is table stakes must have, and that changes expectations of the equipment and the experience you're going to have for the membership that you're paying for a gym. I think John Foley, the founder of Peloton, said it well. Once you've run on a Peloton treadmill, it's unacceptable to go to the gym that you're paying more money for than your Peloton membership and have a little ring of LEDs that look like a running track, and that's your you have an elevated expectation from what you are getting at home. And so I think for gym owners, that's really the conversations we have with gym owners, with studios, with brands, is you don't have to utterly turn the whole, gym into like some digital crazy experience. But most consumers, I'll stick my neck out here. In the next 24 months, most consumers will have an expectation that the warm-up floor isn't just some crappy yoga mat they can unroll that somebody hasn't wiped down properly from the last time. Bay Club. The warm-up floor is, I'm going to have an expectation that, my warm-up is being monitored and I'm being given recommendations as to what additional movement prep I should be doing based on how my movement quality looks today so that I'm better prepared. That's just like stage one of one camera or 2 or 3 stations that I can warm up in front of that are going to personalize and inform my experience. That's any digital studio, any brick and mortar facility that we speak to who have grand ambitions about, can we have multiple cameras in the ceiling watching everybody on the floor at once and tracking everybody? And the answer is yes, and we can do that. But crawl, walk, run. And the crawl experience is start with the warm up or start with the cool down and bookend the experience and then start to deliver from there. So yeah, you're going to see the brands you love and some that you've never heard of yet delivering these kind of experiences for their customers this year.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it, Steven. I mean, I think this is going to be a game changer for a lot of clubs. And if they get in on it early, they're really going to see how they can enhance the experience for the customers from at home to in the gym. So what?
Sorry to interrupt. If I could just add one other thing as well, is like we have a tendency sometimes to think about this is all about precision coaching, right? That this is Steph Curry correcting my 3-point shot. But think about it. Once you can recognize the movement someone's doing, it can change the simplest of things. Like at home, the at-home workout experience, all I can do is play you a video and hope that you're following along.
Right. And
when I'm done, I don't know what to tell you. You're done. It's a video. You don't pause it. It's like, so I can't even do something as simple in a video-based workout. I can't give you an AMRAP. I could maybe give you an AMRAP, but I can't count how many reps you did. I can't do an EMOM workout. You and I can't be paired off against each other where you do a rep and I rest and then I do a rep and you rest. And suddenly, if you give a phone the ability to know when you and I have done our reps, we can do AMRAPs, EMOMs, partner workouts. We can have scores that aren't based on our heart rate, but scores that are based on, the reps that we did. And you get no reps if your technique's not good enough. And so it doesn't have to be like precision coaching all the time. It's just like as coaches, if we can watch our class, we can deliver more fun, engaging workouts. And engagement and progression, they're the two unlocks for retention. If somebody's engaged in the class and enjoying it, and if they can see the path to getting better, they're much more likely to come back. So that's the kind of experiences we're really trying to unlock, is like not just, Steph Curry level basketball coaching, although if Steph's watching, and I'm sure he watches the show, if Steph's watching, would love to make his masterclass effective. How can we just elevate the in-studio experience is a big part of it.
You're as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you gotta open up that martial arts studio. Because once you take this and you elevate the experience in a studio like that, that's lights out. It's a whole new franchise.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we speak to many martial arts studios, and there's there's concepts that I hope you'll see soon where you can elevate the in-studio experience. But also, listen, I can't tell you how many hours I spent as a kid at home trying to remember my kata, trying to remember my forms. Which way do I turn next? Is it a down block or is it a middle block? I mean, that's a big part of the genesis of Asensei, is like, my students, if I could just be there shouting out the next move, their practice would be incrementally better.
Yeah.
But they're trying to remember their kata, they're leaving a segment out, or they're turning to the left when it should be the right, or they're missing out a punch or a kick in that sequence. And just having me there saying, okay, look over your left shoulder, turn down block. What?
Yeah.
Okay, now step forward on your right leg, midsection punch. Just even me being able to see them and cue them and see them and cue them. Now we can do that. So, martial arts, Zumba, a whole bunch of things where, we can just lead people through choreography, lead people through complex sequences of movement. Yoga, is another great one.
Yeah. And I can see this going to the night you speak of choreography. You see these at the, NFL halftime show, and this whole thing's choreographed. The amount of time of preparation it takes for all those dancers to get in sync.
Right.
Now, this type of stuff, this level of stuff can be done without everyone being together at the same place at the same time. They can all practice.
Right.
So it's big.
Yeah.
And you're onto something huge. And I knew you know it, so I don't have to say anything.
No, but I think, especially for your audience, I think a key thing I would leave behind is every industry has shown us before that you might not be replaced by technology, but you'll be replaced by companies that use technology in ways that you're not. And so, for us, whether we're speaking to big box fitness or we're speaking to boutique studios, crawl, walk, run. So really just start thinking about what are those bookend member experiences where I walk in the studio and I warm up, or maybe I finished my workout and I want to cool down and get some readout in my cool down of like, great workout today. Your hips are looking a little tight. Here's the mobility you should be doing over the next couple of days before you come back to class. Like even just those micro moments of engagement allow you to kind of hold the consumer's hand. And then what you'll then be able to do is just incrementally bring more and more of this kind of technology into the workout experience. And we didn't really talk about this today, but one of the experiences can also be if you've got one trainer on the floor and 50 people in a class or 200 people in a gym, how do you make the trainer more effective? So how do you watch me with Asensei, but not route the feedback to me, the consumer, but route the feedback to the trainer on the floor, that Steven is on concept 2 rowing machine number 7. He's opening his back too early and not using his legs, and maybe you should go over and give him a pause at finish drill as a reminder to. And so suddenly I'm rowing at my local gym and a coach walks over and knows exactly the coaching I need because my movement was being watched on their behalf. Those are the kind of experiences we're thinking about, not just how to track every set and every rep and every weight, right, and give you constant form feedback. It's not necessarily what you want every time you go to the gym.
Steven, thanks so much for being on. Guys, if you have any questions about this, go online, check out Asensei. He's done some really fantastic work. The one and only Steven Webster. And as always, I always say it, please share this information. I mean, because there are people out there that you don't know who you're going to impact. And I've always said, and I'm a firm believer in this, that we're all here on this planet for a reason. And because of that, you got to share that knowledge. Otherwise, it just kind of goes to waste. So share that information and share it with others. And thanks for listening. I really appreciate everyone. Thank you.